Hello everyone and welcome to, let's call it an update video. So first I'm going to talk about all the things that are changing, and after that I'm going to talk about the thing that actually matters that is changing, which is of course the matchmaking. So with the new update, 24 tanks will transition from premium to collectible, and honestly for us it doesn't matter all that much. You can sell them for gold instead of credits, and that's also going to change. Basically that you have to buy them back twice as expensive if you haven't sold them before the update, but that's a whole other thing. Not really a big fan of that either. I think the increase is way too much, but on the other hand, Wargaming never intended for people to actually sell their collectibles in order to buy other tanks or to gamble. It was never meant to work like that, so I understand why they're doing it, even if I think that the increase is way too much. And yeah, I know that a lot of people were always happy with the collectibles because they could sell them for gold, and you could still do that, only buying them back is going to be a lot more expensive. There's a bunch of tanks that are going to get new visual quality, which is the AMX 1390, the RU251, T34, T34 Independence, Jagdtiger, T54 and the E3. Of course the T110E3 to make it proper. And like I said, basically buying back tanks that you've sold is going to be a lot more expensive, also for credits, but mainly, of course, we mostly care about the gold, because credits are a lot more easily grinded than gold is, basically. Even when you watch the ads and you play all the events and you do all your missions, if you are a free-to-play player, it's not easy to get by gold. So yeah, I understand people being upset about that, but like I said, Wargaming never intended for people to be able to basically sell their tanks to buy other tanks or to gamble and open crates and all of that. And basically what they're doing now is forcing people to think more before they sell, or to actually keep their tanks. So yeah, there's that. So before I forget, like if you sell a tank for 5k gold before the update, then after the update you will be able to buy it back for 5k gold once. However, if you sell the tank for 5k gold after the update, then after that, if you want to restore it, you have to pay 10k gold. In a nutshell, that's basically how the new economy thing will work. And of course, there will be a few more legendary camos that are new, and things will look fancy and beautiful, because to be fair, I am a huge fan of the graphics team, and that's never going to change, because even if I don't always like the decisions Wargaming makes, the graphic team is doing such a fantastic job. I'm the fangirl, and I always will be. So with all the side notes of the update out of the way, I want to focus on the thing that is actually mainly what this video will be about, which is of course the matchmaker. Now, once upon a time, in a beautiful history of an innocent little game called Blitz, there was the matchmaker. The matchmaker was pretty much completely random. Like, tiers would be taken into account on up to a certain level, because we had +2, -2 matchmaker at the time, which meant that tier 8 would see tier 10 or tier 6, depending on, well, basically what game you were put in. But it didn't mean that it was always like balanced. You could have 2 tier 10s on your team, and then let's say 3 tier 9s and 2 tier 8s, and the other team could have 1 tier 10, 4 tier 9s and 2 tier 8s or something like that. It wasn't like completely balanced. Over time that became like different, and the tiers would be properly balanced, and at some point we got -1 +1 matchmaker, which honestly has made the game very much more boring, to be fair. I still enjoy it though, but like when you were bottom tier, you really had to think about what you were doing and how you were going to do it. And of course the tanks were balanced differently as well, so that also made an impact, stuff like that. Anyhow, basically matchmaker was random. At some point tank tier was introduced as more of a balancing factor, mainly that both teams would have equal numbers of the same tier. Matchmaker became +/-1. Then tank types were also put into account, because there would be teams with like 6 TDs and a med, and the other team would have 5 meds and 2 heavies, and that was generally a bad idea. So that became balanced as well. So the matchmaker started looking at tank tier, tank type, and tank weight. Now, tank weight was introduced mainly to like avoid one team having all the super heavies and the other team having only the heaviums, which basically made a very big difference in armor and everything. And that was basically the matchmaker that most people have known for a very, very long time. And then came update 10.7. Now, 10.7, or rather the skill-based matchmaking that Wargaming introduced then, was sort of like an idealistic idea, I think we can say, from Wargaming, because they wanted to make the matches more fair. Like, matches had been over pretty quickly, you had landslide victories, landslide defeats, basically meaning that one team would have all players still alive and the other one would have none alive. A lot of that had to do more with teamwork than anything else, but that aside, basically Wargaming wanted to fix that sort of stuff, so they decided to give us skill-based matchmaking. Now, people have always complained about the teams, and have always, well, plenty of people have basically complained about wanting skill-based matchmaking, not realizing that skill-based matchmaking eventually brings everyone to 50% win rate. But they think that they would do better in a skill-based setting, really. So basically, it doesn't really work like that. And in this case especially, it doesn't work like that because Wargaming didn't balance the teams as per player versus player. Like, if I'm gonna use myself as an example, I'm a 67% player. I don't consider myself super pro or anything, but I know I'm well above average. So 67% would make sense if it was versus another 67% player. Like, you can follow that. Like, you have two 50% players on your team and the other team would have two, and everything like that. But even for the EU server, that sort of matchmaking would make the queue times really, really long. Which is one reason why Wargaming isn't really looking forward to that, because like on servers that are a lot smaller, like NA and APAC, the queue times are already a lot longer than on the EU server. And if you start being that specific with the matchmaking, it makes things very, very difficult. Now, basically what they did though is that they didn't make the matchmaker player versus player. They made it team versus team, which basically, I'm gonna make this as simple as I can, so I'm gonna talk about teams of 4 because easy numbers. If you are a 60% player, then and you have two 50% players on your team and you have a 40% player on your team, that means that the other team could have an even 4 of 50%, which means that as a whole, the average win rate of the teams is the same, but the team that has 4 people of 50% is likely to do a lot better than your team of 60, 50, 50 and 40, because your 40% player will be a lot worse than the average player on the other team. So that's part of the issue. And of course it didn't only look at win rate, it also looked at number of battles, average damage, survival rate, etc, etc, etc. Doesn't really matter. I'm using win rate to explain it easy. Because the way that Wargaming did this skill-based matchmaking, it basically meant if you are a good player, you get screwed over by the matchmaking, because your teammates will definitely be worse than the teammates on the other team, because of the fact that you have that balancing factor of having worse players because you are a better player. And that made basically the game really, really frustrating to play for anyone that has a brain in the game, basically. Like, look at this game. You saw how quickly people die. You saw how he had an AFK. He's currently done nearly 5.5k damage. He is alone versus 3 and he's a one-shot for everyone. Now, when they come at you like this, of course that helps, but that's also because the other team, of course, also has less pro players. And again, getting that kill is very lucky, but now he's against one of the most armored tanks in the game. On his own, he is a one-shot. If he manages to do this though, he will get a raz. And epic damage to boot. So yeah, this is basically the issue. Like, if you're good, your teams will be worse. And that meant that for most good players, the teams got so bad that regardless of how much they carried, there were a lot of times that they just couldn't win. Like in this case, we are watching Bolt. Bolt, real name is Ollie. We're watching Ollie play a fantastic, absolutely fantastic game. But you can't always do that. Like in this case, it all worked out perfectly. But if you have the issue of basically not being as good in this tank, not having this rate of fire, making one little mistake, and you would end up doing 7k damage like he's done now and losing with 6 kills. Not so much because you weren't good or because you actually made the mistakes, but because you got screwed over by the matchmaker, really. So that is very, very frustrating. And the games were like that for a lot of people. Like I'm gonna go use myself as an example again. Like when I normally play, I like tuning. This matchmaker actually made tuning worse because then we had 2 above average players on my team, which meant that the other 5 were absolutely... no, there isn't really a polite term to use for that, but let's say not so good. And that meant that tuning was even less fun than soloing. But even when soloing, the average win rate that I got was roughly 20%, rather than the 70 or sometimes 80-ish% that I used to get. And like, yes, of course I had bad sessions as well. I'm not perfect. Like I said, I do not consider myself pro. I consider myself above average. Well above average, but I'm not pro. The things that Ollie does here, I would not have the nerves to, well, like I would not be able to stay as cool as he is while doing this. But this is one of those games that it does work out, and he does get his rest, and he does 8k damage, and it is bloody awesome. But at the same time, it shows so much that is wrong with the skill-based matchmaker, because normally, like, games like this happen. They happened in random matchmaking as well. The thing is that with the new matchmaking, the skill-based matchmaking, this was pretty much how it went forever. Like, if you were a really good player like Ollie, you would get matches like this left and right. And if you didn't carry, you didn't monster carry, then you just wouldn't win. And this is a collection of screenshots that I've basically gotten from my clan server and other places. And I'm not showing them to shame players. I'm showing them this. These are good players, like my clanmates and everything, and friends. And the thing is, that I want to point out is the difference between damage between them and the sect. Like, this is another one of Ollie's. He's done nearly 7k. The one below him hasn't even done 2k. And it goes like this repeatedly. I'm showing both losses and wins for a reason, because it goes both ways, of course. It's not always against you. But it is really, really frustrating when this is how you lose, or this is what you have to do consistently in order to win a game. And that is really, really frustrating. And as a side result, like, it's not just about the having to carry or needing someone to carry monsterly, because there's been more AFKs that I've encountered, at least. There's been more people that sort of like completely YOLO in, have no idea what they're doing, don't know the front end from the rear end of their tank, and etc. Because that's also what you see. You see a lot of 0 damage, and like, I don't mind legit people that are AFK, because there's a lot of reasons that people can go AFK. But most of the 0 damage games that you see from people these days isn't from people that were AFK. It is from people that didn't know what they're doing, went to the wrong place at the wrong time, met the whole enemy team when they went off alone, stuff like that. And it just makes for very frustrating games. But again, the thing that I mostly want to point out here is the difference between the first and sometimes the first and second and the rest of the team damage-wise, and how easy it was to lose games regardless of how well you did, just because you weren't perfect enough to do everything flawless. And yes, of course, it is not all bad. Like, I had lots of aces, and yeah, people basically breaking their damage record, like Zach here, and there were very epic games as well. And if it worked, it was glorious. But if you go from a 70 or 80% win rate because you're a really good player and you know what to do, and you drop down to around 20% win rate, maybe 30 if you're lucky, because you consistently get screwed over by the matchmaker by giving you way worse teammates than other people would have, simply because you're a really good player and your stats basically screw you over, then that doesn't make the game fun. And that's also the issue that I faced with this whole skill-based matchmaking. And it sounds really whiny when you put it like that, but it's kind of like you have to see the bigger picture, because you see the games as sort of like there are moments, but if those moments are everything you have and everything you have to do, I mean, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we have more fun winning than losing. So when you consistently lose, the game loses its fun. And there's actually a meme that I've got here. Now, I can't for the life of me remember who first made it, who first posted it, because I saw it a number of places and I saved it because it was really funny to me. But it's also really, really true. 40% is won't have noticed anything changed. 50% are slightly above average. It will be harder for them, but they might win more. And the really good players have a really hard time winning regardless of how good they are. And that's basically why skill-based matchmaking was such a nightmare to pro players or really good players or well above average players even. And I have to give kudos to Wargaming for actually listening to all of us and changing their minds and reversing this, because you have to keep in mind that the data won't have basically backed up this reversal of the matchmaker, because the data actually did show that matches were lasting longer, and it did show that worse players, average players, etc. were having more wins, so probably more fun as well. But they will have also showed that this small, very small percentage of really good players actually had no fun at all whatsoever anymore. And for Wargaming to listen to that very small percentage is something that I'm really, really grateful for, because as it isn't really backed up by game data, that is a very unique decision for Wargaming to make. And they have only done that once before, and that was with the missiles. So Wargaming doing this, reversing this, and actually making the game fun for me again, I'm really grateful for. And I think that that's the case for most, let's say, well above average players, that by Wargaming doing this, it actually means that the game will be fun again, that we will actually want to play again. Because if I'm completely honest, if they hadn't reversed it, I probably would have stopped playing. And I love the game, I love the concept of it and everything, so I don't want to stop playing. But I have to remember that I'm not really a fan of the fun modes. Like, I will play them if I have to, but the only ones that I genuinely like are Uprising and Boss Mode, and up to a certain level Gravitizing, because it's basically Uprising. And I usually always take out my Smasher with that, and then it's really good anger management therapy. But yeah, other than that, I'm not a fan of the fun modes. I don't want to play this game for the fun modes. And when this came out, I relatively quickly after skill-based matchmaking was introduced, I reached 5k ratings, and I want to get my T49 Fearless Pass. So I've actually not been touching it after, because I don't want to drop below 5k. And things get frustrating then, because you have no fun modes that you want to play, and you have no rating that you can play, and you don't want to play the normal matches because it's frustrating and just not fun to play. So then what's left? You can play tournaments, but that's even more diehard, so why would you? Plus it's only at certain times on certain days of the week and everything. So yeah, and I know that of the content creators and community contributors that Wargaming has and works with, I'm not the only one that was at that point. So I'm not sure if that influenced Wargaming's decision at all, or just like the feedback of everything, but I'm really grateful for Wargaming for reversing this and giving us the fun matchmaker back. Like, I want the potatoes on my team. I want the potatoes on the reds as well. It is so much more fun and relaxing when you do not have to die hard everything, and when you can just have fun with it and you don't need to be super careful, because if you die then you lose. So yeah, for all of that I am grateful to wargaming. And at the same time, wargaming is actually said that we are going to get a gift in the store. Like, you can claim it between April 18th and the 2nd of May, and they say that it's to show their appreciation for our feedback and our opinions and feelings about the game and everything. And it's going to consist of 5 premium days, 500 goals, 5 times 5 certificates, and a collectible chest. So best of luck with the chest. Hope you all get something fun out of it. But I see it more as a sorry you made yourself so much gift. But I'm still grateful that we are getting it. And like I said, I'm really grateful for wargaming for turning this back and giving me the game back that I've enjoyed for nearly 10 years now. So that's basically my 2 cents on the whole subject. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's a long one, but I think there was lots to be said. So that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, like I said, and I'll see you all later.